And welcome back, everybody, to the Podcaster Nation. That's right, I said welcome back because I know you were just listening to our stuff and you came back for more. I don't blame you. That was a fantastic decision. You're very bright. I appreciate you guys coming back for more because we have a lot more for you. Folks, this is the podcast that is about podcasters, it's for podcasters, and it's done by podcasters. And yes, you cracked the code. Our guest today is a podcaster. So, folks, we're going to have a great time today. It's going to be a magnificent interview. And this guy is incredibly interesting, has a great podcast. You're going to love hearing from him. He's also got one heck of a message that he wants to share with you. And I think you're going to appreciate it. Folks, this is the place where we come together to raise each other up. And like I'm always saying, this is the place where the rising tide raises all ships. So let's get sailing and introduce our guest today. Please welcome the host of True Crime, Authors, and Extraordinary People, David McClam. David, how you doing this morning?
Hey, Roy, pretty good. Thank you for having me on the show, man. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you being here, brother. We've got a lot to talk about. I definitely want to get into the podcast and everything else, but when you were coming on the program, you and I talked, and I know that your backstory is incredibly important to you, and you feel like the type of thing that you're going to get ready to talk about doesn't get anywhere near enough, publicity. It doesn't get enough coverage, and I admire you for what you're about to share, and I just want to go ahead and give you the floor, brother. So, tell everybody, who is Dave McClam? Why are you here, and what's your story, man?
So, David McClam is a 52-year-old married man. Been married for about 23 years. I have 6 kids, 7 grandbabies right now. My profession is in tech, and of course, I'm a podcaster. I think my biggest story besides podcasting is that I'm also a domestic abuse survivor on two fronts. One from my parental unit being my father, and then another from an ex-wife now. I think it's incredibly important that I share a little bit of that because there is a lot of us that go through this, especially men. Men do not talk about this. Usually it's cultural reasons or, like in Hispanics, machismo, and in African Americans, you got to be tough and strong and just the way that we're built. And so I think by sharing a little bit of my story, we help those other men out there that may be going through or have been domestic abuse to share their story. Um, Suicide is highest among men, mainly because of issues like this. So
Wow.
that's why I always try to share a little bit of that story wherever I go.
Wow. I mean, that's huge what you're talking about right now. And it is a gigantic problem that never gets covered, never gets talked about, and for all the reasons that you mentioned. Um, how did this all start, man?
So with my father, I was probably around 2 or 3. I remember everything vividly though from the age 4 up. A lot of people say young children don't remember these things, but when it's something that's traumatic and it shaped your life, you do end up remembering some of that. My dad was a very abusive man. He beat my mother profusely. He's hung me out of 3-story windows. I've been beat. I've seen my mom hog tied to a bed, forced sexually, you name it. I've seen it. My mother passed on me 5 years ago this year at the tender age of 67. And it's believed that because of the amount of abuse that she suffered, gave her an earlier grave than what she should have had. Um, and so, being a young man, I was raised solely by my mother. My dad had no part in raising me. Actually, he tried to deny I was his kid because, when African Americans don't naturally come out black when they're born. So he accused my mom of having sex with a white guy and said I was the bastard son of a white man.
Oh,
And
wow.
the military doesn't really protect you, at least back then, because he was a Marine. And the military is supposed to have this extraordinary code of conduct that you would get pretty much kicked out and jailed for any type of domestic abuse, things of that nature. Drug addict, because he was one. That didn't happen. So that's the quick portion of that. So I survived that with my mom. My mom was my everything until she passed away. And now being a father, I try to do everything, of course, the opposite of what he did. Be there for my kids if I can, whenever I can, and that takes a toll on discipline and spanking in the whole 9 yards. So it does shape a man's life going forward. Um, as you probably could imagine.
You dropped a ton right there, man. I appreciate you sharing, that kind of thing. First, let me just say I'm sorry for your loss, of your mom. That's rough, and my heart goes out to you on
Appreciate
that
it.
one for sure. Second, let me say congratulations on your marriage and kids and grandkids because that's just unbelievably cool and blessed. So, congrats on those points. Also, I know that kind of
Thank you.
get you through the other stuff. Um, as someone who's been through a similar situation, and my listeners have heard my story, so I'm not going to waste everybody's time with that because this is about you, brother. But let me just tell you, you do have a sympathetic ear right now because I get it. Um, but a lot of people don't, and you're wanting to come on here and share the message. Um, have you had? I want to frame all the questions correctly here because I know how sensitive it is too. What's it been like for you trying to share the story as, I mean, a strong man? I mean, clearly you are. You got a family. You're a leader in your own home. You can tell. Just 5 minutes with you, and I pick it up. I get it. I've heard your podcast. Your strength comes through in your voice, brother. Um, you can tell you've been through some stuff. What's that experience been like? Have you been met with, hey, get over it, buck up, you're a man type of thing? Has there been, empathy for what happened to you? What have you encountered as a man who went through that kind of thing?
Oh, I get a mixed bag of it. I get the what you said. Get over it. It's been years. I've gotten the "Why didn't your mom leave?" Which is the biggest thing that part of my friends pisses me off when I watch. Right now, I'm dealing with the domestic dispute case ended in murder that's all over YouTube right now, which I'm going to be doing on, which is Duchess Dior. She went by, and then her husband was a Frenchman. And that was number one. Well, how come she couldn't leave? It's the middle of the day. She could have been gone. I've also dealt with the counselors that said, well, you're just doomed, right? Your dad abused you. You're going to abuse every woman in the world. You're going to abuse your kids. You're not going to have any sense of not doing that. So, of course, I started to break those norms. It is very true that sometimes men, especially that has been abused, follow that footstep. But I've come to figure out that the biggest reason is because they had no kind of a support system. I did have a very strong mother that backed me up. I'm a junior. My full name is Raymond David McClam Jr. I never went by Raymond. I hated it because it was my dad. It was my mom that told me it's the man that makes the name, not the name that makes the man. So I guess with that tidbit, especially when I went through abuse with my ex-wife, that was the whole thing. Oh my gosh, you're a big man, you got abused. Well, the thing about it is sometimes too, men who's been through abuse kind of is set up for that. What I mean by that is this: once you tell a woman, some women, not all, hey, I've been domestically abused, my dad has beaten me, they take that as a way that if they make you mad, oh my God, you're gonna hit me, you're gonna beat me like your dad did. So they use that. And in the mind of at least strong men and women, it's just impossible for a man to be beaten up by a woman. But when you have a man that refuses to hit a woman, it's a whole different scenario. I was hitting the back of the head with frying pans. At the time I lived in Minnesota. I lived in Minnesota most of my life. I was locked out in a blizzard that was 0 below plus with wind chill. Um, and I would never hit that woman back. And the same woman told my mom, hey, I'd rather have him, because my whole thing when it came to counseling my mom put me in is if I'm in the situation where I feel like I can't handle myself, it's best to leave. So I was trying to leave because I said, hey, I'm getting worked up. I got to go. And she literally told my mom, I'd rather have him hit me than to leave. And my mom's like, are you a fool? Uh, so when I've called the police out before because of that, police was laughing. I mean, I literally, oh my gosh, dude, you're like 6 foot plus. You weigh 275. This woman's beating you. Are you serious? I'm like, see, this is why men don't report this because it's a joke, right? To
Right.
them. So all I would say to orders is this: before you make those judgments, understand what domestic abuse is, understand how domestic abuse works, especially when it comes to women. It's manipulative. It's the you'll never find anybody else. It's the woman who doesn't have her own assets, that the man controls everything, that she can't leave. It's the why don't you ask, did you try to leave? My mom tried to leave several times. We've been to several shelters and things like that. Understand, my mom was really young when they met. She was in her 20s, like 21. She had me at 22, right? First love, isolation. My dad isolated us, moved us far away from anyone that we knew.
Hmm.
And every time we went to a shelter, he would find us because back then it wasn't like the security is now. He would lay down the things that I'm sure, Rory, if you have heard, all right, baby, I'll never do it again. Just come back. It won't happen. Everything's good for a week. And then after that, it's back to normal. So
Yeah,
that's the part I try to get across to people. Before you say, can't you just leave? Understand that that is always not the option.
right. It's such a simple thing people think and they say because everybody wants to judge, just right out of the gate. Everybody thinks they know better all the time. So I definitely understand that. Nobody ever understands that, leaving isn't just that simple. It's just not. I mean, where are you going to go? How are you going to eat? You got a
Right.
kid you got to take care of, right? So, yeah, I feel that
Right.
the domestic abuse with the spouse is another. It's a very different dynamic, isn't it? Especially, with what you're suffering and with what you're how it's met.
It is. And then I'll say this, and I don't mean this to be racial in any tone, but it was when I called the police. I was a black guy and my wife was white at the time. So it automatically was assumed that I was the one that was being the abuser at that point,
Sure.
being the black male and bigger, right? Um, but yeah, it's a whole different dynamic. It's different now in the laws than it was way back in the 90s because now if you call the police out and you say she hit you and she says you hit her, you both have to go to jail. But back
Mm.
then it was like we're just gonna figure out who we think it is and put people in the cuffs that we think we need to put them in. But it's a whole different thing because the same from a parent, but then your spouse should be the second person in the world that you should be able to trust that won't hurt you. And when it comes down to that, you just don't know where to go at that point anymore. But like I said,
Right.
it's totally a whole different dynamic. It's a different feeling, and it really shapes marriage from here on out for that individual.
Sure. No, I've talked because of my past too, and I'm sure you've encountered this. We've probably both talked to a lot of men who have been through similar situations. And it's interesting to see how differently everybody reacts, how they come out. Like you said, sometimes they follow in the footsteps. Sometimes they end up like you and I, where it's like there's no way in the world you would ever follow in the footsteps because it's just unthinkable, from what you've seen. It's not even part of your DNA. But by the same token, it does go both ways in some cases. The I'm curious with what you've had to go through. Um, how has raising your kids and your grandkids and all those types of things, how has that been, and I'm sure it has been, but how has that been impacted by what you went through in both circumstances?
Greatly. With the kids of today, you have to be hard on them, but then you always question yourself, am I too hard? Right. I didn't like to get yelled at. Should I yell at them? What's going through? So everything that you've been through, it goes through your brain. And the one thing I've set aside is, I will never let my anger get so far to where I have to physically put my hands on my children or feel like I'm going to do that. Um, I've been through counseling when I was younger and I had a great mom. So I think when I started having children, I had my first kid at 19, by the way. When I started having children, I already had that mindset of what I knew I was going to do and wasn't going to do. I wanted to replace the things that my dad never did or I didn't have a dad for. When you have an even split three and three, three sons, three daughters, especially on that son end, I didn't have anybody take me to baseball games or come to my, basketball games or show me how to tie a tie. So you make sure that you're around for those important things for all of your children. And I have been that. And I thought so I'm not perfect, I make mistakes, but and my 15-year-old son now says, "Well, Dad, you're too protective, and you just because I'm always on about the internet, who you're talking to." And I said, "Hey, I wish I had a dad that was this protective of me. I'm only this way because I love you." And I think that if I wouldn't have went through the abuse that I did, and I would never wish on anybody else, but it does shape your mind and your decision making on how you handle certain things now, domestic disputes, arguments with the children. So I think I've come out of that pretty well. But again, I give all the credit to my mom. Without her, I don't think I would have survived or been the man that I am now.
Bless her, man, for everything she went through and for getting you through it. So, 100%. It's funny because I know that when you're a father, a grandfather, whatever, in that position, and you've been through this sort of thing, it I know for me, you're constantly checking yourself.
Mhm.
Even when you respond to what is probably normally to some, minor situation, you're always checking yourself. Like it's always in the background going, am I being too loud? Am I being too harsh on this one thing? Am I overreacting? Do you find that happens to you, and how do you work through that?
Yes, I have to always constantly think before I react or respond. Because still, right? I mean, I'm still a human and I still deal with these things. And sometimes when you come at me a certain way, I want to fire back a certain way. And I have to think about that, how to do that. And the thing about it is, for all the men that's listening, if you don't feel like you're quite there yet, I'm 52, right? It took me until my middle 40s to start what I call simmering down and where I was able to start putting perspectives into things. I had a neighbor that wanted to fight me 2 years ago because my son threw paint on his driveway. And he was all out there with his fist ball. And I was like, dude, look, what's that going to solve? Now, when I was 25, I would have been like, okay, let's just get busy. But once you get older, you think about what is the fight really worth? What's the outcome going to be? What do I lose in this? Do I lose my job? Do I lose my family? Do I lose my life? These are things that you start to process because you remember what you've been through, and you don't want to have to go through any of that again or put anybody through that. So yes, it does take a lot of thinking.
Yeah. With your dad and with your ex, was there a trigger for them? Like alcohol or drugs or something like that that put them in that position, or was it just behavioral when they got to a certain point, they just sort of lost it?
When it came to my dad, I think alcohol played a role. Also, his trigger was anything he didn't like, right? If his spaghetti wasn't hot enough, he's throwing this plate against the wall of my mom
Oh
saying,
wow.
"Give me some more spaghetti." So it didn't have to be any one certain thing that she did. He could say hi to her and she could say hi back, and he thought she was being smart and snap. When it came to my ex-wife, a lot of it was because she wanted to get back together, and I turned her down for that. And that's where that began. We were still in the same spot at the time, trying to move out, and that's when that broke loose. So I think that was looking at her, and back then it was retaliatory, but she just snapped, right? I mean, I guess because of the rejection, we had already tried this several times. When this is not going to work, we got to get rid of that. So two different scenarios with them, but yeah, with my dad, it was just a constant. You never knew what was going to happen with him. I was always by the door because he starts to yell. I'm ready to run out the door because I don't know what's going to come next. So I do
Wow.
think alcohol and drugs did play a part when it comes to my dad, though. I do believe that.
Yeah. Okay. I was just curious, and I appreciate you being so open with all this, man. I really do. I think it's worse when you have that behavioral thing that you never know what's coming. For us, it was alcohol. So I mean, when my dad would come home and open the bottle, we all knew. It's like, okay, we got about an hour. Everybody, hunker down, go find your spot to hide, be very, very quiet, and try not to trigger. And as long as you could just, stay quiet and hide for a while, then sometimes you made it through. You know what I mean? So we almost had
Right.
a strategy we could put together for how to deal with the problem. When it's that behavioral thing, like what you're talking about, people who haven't been through it don't realize how much worse that is because you can't even pseudo prepare for what's coming. It could be drop of a hat and you're like, whoa, no idea that was coming.
Right. Right. And that's the scariest part because you live your life day to day with, I hope this doesn't happen. Right. And then the other thing I'll clip real quick because I know some of your orders are going to ask, because I've been asked. I've told my story also on my podcast. I've been on several other shows because my mission for this year was to get on as many podcasts as I could to spread this story so that men out there, especially, won't help everybody, but especially the men that's holding this in, maybe feel they can get that out. The other thing is, well, you go to school. Why didn't you tell anybody there? You have to understand, it's kind of like I liken it to the mob. If you go after the Don and you miss, you already know
Oh,
you in for it. Someone's gonna come take you out. And that's the mindset that you have. Okay, yes, I can go to my counselor and tell my counselor that I'm getting beat and the whole nine. But what if I miss? What if he's able, because abusers are very good at manipulation. They're very good at talking. So what if he talks him out of it? No, no, he's just, selling wolf tickets. He got in trouble here. Well, I already know what's going to come after they leave. So it's kind of like, do I deal with what I'm dealing with at home now? Or do I make it potentially worse for me and my mother on the other end if they don't believe what I said when they come out to the house? And that's a lot of the reason why a lot of kids won't say anything. Now it's a little bit different. I have worked with some schools that once they feel the kid is in jeopardy or the kid comes, they remove the kid immediately. So they would send somebody out and they would call DCFS out to get the child. But it wasn't like that back when I was coming up in the 70s and 80s at that point.
Yeah, no, for sure. Things definitely have changed, and you and I are very close to the same age. I'm 55, so I mean, I'm feeling every bit of this story, brother. Man, that is such a great not only a point to bring up, but an analogy for how that works. I mean, if you go after the Don and you miss, you're done.
Yeah.
And they don't get that. The people who are judging on the outside are also sitting there going, well, you know, if it was just me, if I go after him and I miss, and I'm the only one that suffers, you know what? Maybe I take that risk. You know what I mean? Because it's me. But I can't
Right.
take that risk for my brothers, my sisters, my mom. Because then my actions brought all that on them, and they don't understand that guilt and pressure.
Right. And I think that's what my mom was too. I always tell you, I think my mom took the worst beatings because she had to protect me. And she was asked years later, well, how come you just didn't up and go? She goes, I had a child. And there was a number of times where she did want to run out the door, but he was snatching my arm. You're not taking him with. But she goes, I'm not going to leave my child here with all of this.
Yeah.
And right, that's going on. And unfortunately for my mom, it was a pattern. Right, she got on with my dad, and she met another guy. He was abusive, and I mean, my story could be gone on forever. But I've been in shelters. We've had to switch states. I mean, there's a lot of things that happens, but you also have to have the people in the government agencies that's willing to help you.
Hmm.
And once you get that, you have more of a freedom to get out. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So let me ask you that as we kind of, shift gears just a little bit here. Brother, I appreciate your story. Huge. As you tell this story, and you brought up the government agencies, you've brought up men, hearing this and not feeling alone. Um, as you're telling this story, what is your biggest, greatest hope to come from you telling this story? What do you hope happens or changes for people who are in that position, whether it be moms or kids?
Healing and courage. I hope that by hearing what I'm saying, that the woman that's in this that feels like she has no way out or can't go tell somebody can find just a little bit of courage to go and say to somebody, I need help, knowing that there's people out here that will help you. There's all kind of agencies now. If you have kids, DCFS, there's women agencies. You can walk into a fire department now and say, I'm being abused, and they'll come help you. So just, and I know it's scary, but just the courage to be able to say, I need help. Somebody will listen and get you out of that. For the men, I would love to help bring down that suicide rate. And the suicide rate among men is high because a lot of us deal with domestic abuse issues that we are still holding in. As you know, as a man yourself, there was a song that came out, country song a while ago. I think it was called "To Be a Man," and that whole thing went through all the trials and tribulations that men go through with providing and being there, and you have to be the counselor and the dad and the husband, and nobody on the outside cares what a man goes through as long as he's putting that money on the table.
Yep.
So I'm hoping that for men that hears this, they know they're not alone, and maybe by hearing me come on here and tell my story, it would give them the courage to say, hey, I can tell my story as well, come to grips that I have been in this situation, and also get some help.
Yeah. Wow. Wow, brother. So, all right, I would be remiss if I didn't ask if there's a connection between the subject of the podcast, which is true crime, and the way that you grew up. Is that is that influenced by that?
The true crime portion of it isn't, but the extraordinary people is. So because I was
Nice.
thinking as I was branding my show, so we're gonna segue into that. I kind of give you that. So, and then we'll backtrack. But I want to tell you how I branded my show, why I came up with that name. So the original name of the podcast was True Crime and Authors. What happened was I started podcasting now 9 years ago, and I started with my oldest daughter, Geneva, who is now 32. We ran that show together for 4.5 years. What we did not try to do, but did, I guess we was told, we made podcasting history. I was reached out to by Spreaker, which I thought was a joke, and they say, hey, we want to sign you guys to a lifetime deal where we'll give you hosting because we believe in your show. And I asked, well, why is that? I said, of all the other shows, why did you guys pick us? And it goes, well, you guys are unique. You made history twice. I'm like, really? She says, yeah. She goes, you're the only father-daughter team in any genre of podcasting at this time. Now, since then, who was a black actor, and his daughter has made one. But we are on my podcast, I said we were the originals. And she goes, the second is because being that you're African American, you're the first in that genre too. So you made history twice. So after she pretty much decided to give up podcasts, went to do booktube stuff back in 2020, 2021, I still want to do podcasting and I still want to do true crime. But the problem is true crime is so oversaturated. If you type in true crime in any search engine for podcasts, you get a million of them. And I've been known, they call me the niche master because I always come up with these niches that is different. So I started thinking, what do I want to do? I want to do true crime, but how can I stand out from everybody else? And I read a lot, but a lot of the books I like to read is life stories and usually from authors that no one's ever known. So I said, that's it. True crime and authors. What if I don't know who these authors are? No one else does either. Let's get them help and get their books sold because they're great authors. So True Crime and Authors was the original name of the show. And then halfway through, I got the start. I said, hey, I've been through some traumatic stuff in my life. What if I can get other people to come on my show and tell their stories of all kinds, and maybe they can help people? So in my first year, about 6 months through, I started piloting the Extraordinary People leg. That's the one thing that connects me to my story. And I started out by telling my story, and I said, hey, this is going to be a new segment. And it took off really well. So at the end of season one, I baked it in. I changed the name of the podcast. And I've interviewed everybody from trafficking survivors to abuse survivors to people that survived wars. And I think that segment really helped. And what I was looking to do in that is I wanted to always leave somebody with something that they felt like could help them. And I think in that third week, every week, I give you somebody that actually say, hey, I've done this. I've been financially ruined. I've been beaten. I've been this, but look where I'm at now. So if I can do it, you can too.
So through the podcast and what you're doing, and by adding the extraordinary people part, because I know that wasn't part of the original title, but by adding you've actually
Right.
continued to just inspire and spread hope, and for people who are like you and need that and may not be getting it somewhere else.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for
Wow.
that.
No, that's amazing, man. That really is. Anybody can do a podcast, but doing a podcast with a purpose takes guts and takes heart. And I applaud you for that. That's fantastic. That really is.
Thank
The and I didn't mean to segue you before you were ready to go, brother.
you.
So I just man, I saw that true crime there, and then I was like, wait a minute. I wonder how much. Um, there's more, I'm sure, that you want to share from your backstory. Um, I want to make sure that you get a chance to share it. The Let me give you the floor for a couple minutes. This is sort of impromptu. I know you weren't prepared for this either, but I'm going to give you the floor for a minute. What is it about your story that that people don't know yet that you still want to tell them that we haven't covered? I usually save that for the end, but you know what, man, this is too big, and it's too important. And I want to make sure that we're not skipping anything, we're not missing anything. Like I said, I'm giving you the floor for a minute. Go where you want to go with this. Tell folks what they need to know, man.
I think you guys have pretty much heard the bulk of my story, but I always like to leave with this. The end point of it is this: I survived and I'm not a victim. And I think that those of us that's been through abuse, we hold on to that victimhood mentality. We need to get out of that and be a survivor. We're still here. No matter what we went through, we survived it. And we can use our story to propel and help someone else. You never know where someone is. You never know the day they hear your story could be the day that you may have saved their lives. I've had people write me and say, hey, because I heard your story, I was going to jump off the bridge next week, but I decided not to. Always be true to yourself, tell that story, be the survivor. My end message is I've been through some traumatic stuff in my life. I've been through many deaths. I've been through this abuse. At the end of it, though, I think I've come out a better person. I have a story that I would never want anyone else to ever go through. But the story is so empowering that it gives even people that's never been through any type of abuse before a glimpse into what that can be like. And it can make them feel too, not only can they help somebody else by showing more empathy, but maybe they get far enough in life too where they say, hey, I've never been through what you've been through, but let me lend that hand out to you. Maybe today I can help you out. So healing, go to counseling if you got to. Confide in your minister if you believe in God. I'm a full believer in God, and I'll tell you flat out, I know I wouldn't be here if he did not exist. So the only part that I think I left out was just that. Be a light to someone else. Don't be afraid to share your story. You never know where that story is going to lead you. You may not have a national voice like myself or Rory does. You can get one if you want. But tell that story wherever you can, man. Help the next person. And that's why I do this. And I don't do this because I want people to feel sorry for me. I don't do this because I want you to necessarily come listen to my show. I do this because I care. And I know how many men commit suicide every year because they've been held down by demons like these that they didn't necessarily create.
Wow. All right, I'm glad we did that because you needed to get that out, brother. that that needed to be said very badly, and I appreciate it. I really do. The I mean, wow, the story. I mean, it's who you are, and it's what leads you to the next step. And it's your faith story, your overcoming obstacle story. It's all about who you are, and it's all about how you got to this next step. So it's important that people hear it for that. Even if folks don't have a story as devastating as yours, I think everybody has a story of some kind. And I think that if God's given you that story, I think you have a responsibility to tell it. It's been
I
placed
agree.
on you to tell it. Yeah.
And it's not a one-upmanship, right? You don't have to go domestic abuse. You don't have to have the worst story in the world. Even if your story was, you left home with a penny and now you became a millionaire. Those stories help people. Your story is unique to you, and you need to tell that as that. And you never know who you can help from that.
Right. I love that you're doing that with the podcast too. I've listened to several of your episodes, and you've got, you bring people on there who model this exact thing you and I are talking about. Where they've overcome something to write their book, or they've overcome something to, become who they are. And so you're focusing on these people, you're featuring these people. Um, I also love, and now I am going to segue to the podcast. So, but I also love the idea that from the get-go, in your initial advertisement from the second iteration of the podcast here, you came out and said, "This is me putting together my multiple passions, and I'm just going to do it this way. I'm going to combine them and come out with this new thing." Did you have people telling you, "Hey, that's not going to work because it doesn't like fit a niche," or I mean, were you just like, "I don't care what anybody says. This is what I want to do. I'm all in."
Yeah, some people said you think that's going to work because what I do is I also do research on that, right? So when I came with that title, I said, I want to know, is there any other show out there that features an author and they tell any type of true crime story? And there were none. I had podcasts that did just true crime. I had podcasts that just did authors or they talked about an author, but nothing. I said, so I'm onto something. If you're doing something that no one else is doing, that's the niche, right? That pulls you out of that 1+ million podcast that says, hey, well, this guy has this title. Let's check him out. What does he do? And to this day, from what I'm still seeing, I'm the only three faceted show of my kind that does those three individual things. So now the people that says it ain't gonna work, I'm like, what do you got to say now? It's been 2.5, 3 years now I've done this show. Well, we was wrong. You see, there you go.
Right. That's what you have to say. You were wrong. Okay. Well, you're right. I love that. How many episodes have you put out of the new iteration of the podcast?
Just slightly over 140 right now. And so
Nice.
I should be further along in season 3, which is what we are now. But this has been the year for family death. So we've had to take some time off, but just about 140. in my whole entire career at this point, just over 700 episodes. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, you've been doing this for a minute, man. Okay. Yeah, cool though. So the latest project though, 140 episodes, man, and you come out weekly, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Tell everybody kind of if they haven't had a chance to hear your podcast, like I have, how it works because I know you've got a rotation that you use and kind of how you lay out your content, so they know what to expect when they come listen to it.
So it's a format. So one week you'll get a true crime story. The next week you'll get an interview that I've done with an author. And then the next week after that, I'll give you an extraordinary person. I think that by doing it this way, you don't get bored with the show, right? So it's not true crime, true crime, true crime. Now there is some times where I don't have or I haven't done an interview yet with the person I have lined up because of time constraints, and I've had to do maybe two true crime episodes at that point. But usually that's the format. And in this way, you feel like you're listening to a different show every week, even though it is the same show.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, you got a great voice, so you know it's still you on the show, man. But let me let me just say that.
I don't know, man. I'm rivaling your voice here. Your voice is pretty decent, pretty great.
Thanks, man. But so I mean, you definitely know it's you, but that's a good point. Is that you're right? Every episode is like a completely different podcast when you're listening to it. That seems to have helped you having that sort of eclectic mix. People seem to like it.
Yeah, I think so. I've gotten great feedback on it. I've even got some people that says they like to go back and listen to other episodes that they've already listened to before. I find myself doing that too, just because I want to see where I've been, where I evolved, right? What did I do this week? And then we always try to do because I know, especially with true crime, it gets real heavy. So if you looked at my format, you would see at the beginning of every season, I try to do some type of a fun case. Like I've done the Monopoly scam was one. I think at the beginning of this season, I did the pressure luck scandal, and that's kind of a palette. I'm like, it ain't gonna be this easy this whole season, so let's have a little bit of fun going into it. So yeah, I've
Hmm.
gotten great feedback from it.
I'm curious because I can see how that would draw listeners. I can also see how it might give you kind of a headache with promoting. Because when you're promoting stuff, you're worried about like what audience are you reaching, and in a way, you're reaching three separate niche audiences with the same podcast. So, do you do different types of promotion, or is it all the same promotion, and you're letting everybody know you get all three? How do you go about promoting that kind of mix?
All the same, I promote the show as one show, just three different topics.
Okay.
And I think what that does too is it draws in that person. So let's just say that you're a person that's interested in just hearing the author interviews. Okay,
Okay.
so you already know every other week there's going to be that. But maybe by coming listen to that, you catch another one of my titles. Hey, what's the whammy scandal? Never heard of that. So that may draw you into listening to that, which is now my true crime side of things. It's also about the titling, as you probably know. Titles is what grips the audience, and what your show notes also says what that episode's going to be. So even if you are not necessarily in that particular genre, just a snippet that you read about what the show's going to be about may cause you to come in. The other thing I found out is people don't like true crime because they feel it's gory, or you got to get into the details. If you listen to my show, when it comes to true crime, I don't tell the gory side of things. I find a way around that, even though I might say, hey, it might get heavy, but I'm not saying people's guts is fine out or whatever the case is. So I've had people that written me and said, I don't even like true crime, but because the way that it's presented here, there's not a lot of swearing in your show, I'm able to digest it. And so I've gotten audience members like that too as well.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. So you're doing a lot of things, and you're doing a lot of things uniquely, also.
I'm trying.
Yeah. I like it. I like it. Now with a podcast that's got those sort of different arms to it, have you been able to monetize it at this point? And have the podcast be making you money?
Yeah, so I just started that. My wife's beat me over the head and says you should be monetizing. But like I said, when I got into the game of podcasting, I didn't necessarily get in to make money. I got into it because I wanted to share my story, and I wanted to share true crime stories and other people's stories around the world to help. But now I'm just getting into that arm now. My arm's getting twisted. So yes, I just switched to a new host that has monetization built into that. Looking at merchandising, and there's as you know, 9 years ago, man, with podcasting, we didn't have all the channels that we have now.
Oh yeah.
Now we've got companies that build just websites just for podcasts, and there's this hosting company that just to do this for podcasts. So now I think it's the time because I have the audience now, and also I have unique things. I just signed up with a company called Crowdweave. They're in beta, but they wanted me to help them test it out, which I can give the audience unique things if they want to support the show.
Hmm.
Right now, I'm going to be adjusting some prices because they're really high. But like for instance, I'm gonna say for $1.50, you get a shout out. Maybe for $3, you get to pick my next topic. You know, certain things like that. If I'm gonna monetize, I want to also feel like I'm giving something back to the audience that's supporting me as well.
Sure. Well, your wife is not the first spouse to, say, hey, with all the time you're spending on this thing, it really should make a couple of bucks.
Yes, I've heard it for a while, and I mean, I did with Speaker. It wasn't a lot, but I was making some money from there because for every episode I got paid monthly, things of that nature. So
Yeah.
yeah, we're starting to look into that now.
Gotcha. Gotcha. All right. Very cool. All right. I got to ask you my corny question. It's kind of my, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'll be back thing. I like to have it in every episode just because we get such great, feedback on it. And with you and your podcast where it is, I have no idea what answer I'm going to get. So this is kind of cool. The question's real simple. It's, when it comes to doing your podcast and stuff, what is it about doing it that you love the most? And what is it about doing your podcast that you just absolutely dislike the most?
I think I love it the most because it's therapy. I feel like I'm talking to people that really care, and I feel like that I'm helping. I feel like I'm getting these true crime stories out there that maybe no one's ever heard of that need to pay attention to, especially when it comes to missing and murder type cases. So I love getting in front of the mic because I don't see them, but I know that I have people that's listening, and I know that I'm making somebody's day. If I only touch one person, I'm happy. The thing I absolutely hate the most is probably what every podcast hates. I hate the production part of it, which is editing and all that good stuff. I think that takes the most time out of me just sitting down talking to somebody for an hour. So if I had one thing I hate the most, it would be that.
Got it. Yeah, if we did this Family Feud style and it was like top five answers on the board, editing is number one answer all the time. So you're not alone there. But I appreciate the answer on the other side though, the therapy. Therapy for your listeners or therapy for you?
I think some point is both. When my mom died on me in 2020, I was real distraught. I wanted to quit everything. And my daughter came and says, "You can't quit podcasting because grandma wouldn't want that." And I said, you know what? Maybe somebody else lost their mom this week. So maybe me coming back on the microphone and letting them know what I've been through and continuing on. And it became really therapy to me because it took my mind for at least that 45 minutes to an hour off of what was going on in my real world. And I could go back after that and deal with that a little bit better now that I've talked to my audience. So, yes, I think it's therapy for both if you
Your,
let it be.
your daughter's a sharp young lady.
Well, thank you. Yeah, she's who I started the podcast with. Actually, she was the one who got me into it. So that's the if I don't tell you that, she'll kill me. But she was the one. We were really big into true crime, and then OJ Simpson was the topic we talked about all the time. And she says, "Well, Dad, let's start a podcast." Now, I had just got through with about 14-year career with YouTube. I ran YouTube up under because I was a gaming expert under Cena's Corner for 14 years. And I'm like, yeah, no. I'm like, podcasting is a whole different thing. It's a whole different set of equipment, different skills. So she bugged me for 6 months. And I finally said to my wife, I says, well, I'm gonna go ahead and do it because she's so going to said this is not gonna even last 2 weeks. And it lasted 4.5 years. So
That's great. You're humoring your kid, and the next thing you know, it's 4 years later, and you're talking about monetization. Okay, man. That's great. I love it. Okay. Hey, I love that. That's fantastic. The you've got best ways to contact you and stuff like that. I'll make sure people have this because you've got a website, and it's
yes, I do.
www.truecrimeandauthors, all one word, .com. What can they expect to find from your website?
So there you will find every episode that I've done for True Common Authors is broken down by seasons. Also, when you sign in my website, you'll see some faces that pops up. Those are some of my top guests that I've had on the show. I usually switch those out. Any guest that has come on the show that's filled out my form, you also get to know more about them because their um, biography is attached to that. You can see, find out where their socials are. And I think the one unique thing about my page also is you can leave me a voicemail message if you like. So on the right hand side, it says leave a voicemail message. You click that and it goes as long as you want it to. And you can send me a message that way as well.
Interesting. All right, cool. I like it. I like it. And then if they want to contact you directly, is the voicemail message the way to go? Is that the best way to do it?
That is one of the ways to go. Also, you can do it by email as well. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's accessible through the website, right?
Yes.
Yes. Good deal. All right.
There's a
Right on.
thing that says drop me a line in case it's not. True crime and authors at gmail.com is the direct link to that.
Awesome. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. All right, man. Listen, you've brought so much to the table today, and your message is incredibly powerful. I think it's incredibly needed. I love that you wanted to make such a point of getting it out there, and I hope that the other podcasts you're on give you that latitude, and don't try to just put you in their box because it's so important that you get to speak the way you need to speak. But let me bring it back to podcasting for one last second. And for you, it doesn't have to be about podcasting. This is too important. So let me just put it this way. Whether it's about podcasting, like it normally is, or if you want to give some advice to folks who are dealing with the abuse situation, let's leave it at that because I want you to be able to go where you need to go with this. What is your best piece of advice for either podcasters who are not quite where you are, or if you'd rather, go ahead and give advice to maybe someone who's going through what you went through out there, um, or both. You can do whatever you want to do. The floor is yours for the last minute or two here.
Well, thank you. I'll give you both. So let me start with people who wants to get in the podcast and not quite where I'm at. I guess the biggest piece of advice I can give you is pick a topic that you are passionate about. You're gonna listen to a lot of YouTube videos, and they're gonna tell you things like a one-person podcast don't work. You got to have two people. You're gonna hear you got to talk on this topic versus this topic. I can tell you, I've already tried all of these. That's not true. You need to pick a topic that is you, what you want to talk about, what you feel like you have knowledge in, and where you're not going to get bored with. The audience can definitely tell if you know your stuff or if you don't, or if you're just doing this to be doing it. Also, make sure you don't do it because you want to get rich. I always tell everybody if you're going to do podcasting, make sure your heart is in it for the right reason. If your sole purpose is money, don't even think about it. Yes, it costs some money to get in the podcast. It could be as expensive as you want, but you're only wasting your time, the audience time, if you just get in because you want to make a quick buck. The buck's not going to come quick. As you just heard, I've been doing this 9 years. I'm just starting to seriously monetize. And you have to build that audience up. I'm not going to say 9 years, but give yourself at least a year to build up some type of an audience that feels that you're giving them value. Then they'll give you money in exchange for what you're doing. And then you can make a little business out of that. On the other side of that, what I want to leave with you just about the domestic abuse thing, kind of what I said earlier. If you are somebody that is finding yourself in this situation, please try to find some way out. I know it is scary. You have a lot of resources now. There's a lot of people. You can go to DCFS and say, hey, I don't want to go back because I'm getting abused. They will put you up somewhere. Please have the courage to get out of that. If you are in a domestic abuse situation, whether it's verbal, mental, or physical, please leave. These things end up deadly, and I don't want to see you guys in the end of that. Like I just said on the show, I'm going to do an episode about a couple that this just happened to on Father's Day. Both of them now ended up dead. So I think you have to be able to read the signs that you are in and be able to get out. And if you're thinking somebody about suicide, I'll tell you what I say at the beginning of every one of my shows, which I tell you that if it's you or you know someone that feels like hurting themselves or others, leave the episode down 988. It is a suicide prevention hotline. They'll give you the help you need because if no one's told you this today, let me be the first. I do care and I need you to be here. That is not something I just come up with for a tagline. I genuinely mean that. Suicide has touched My family, my 15-year-old kid tried to commit suicide last year. So I know how this is. So if you guys have taken anything away from me today with these podcasts, these are the things I would like you to remember.
Wow. All right. Every once in a while, I get that feeling where God's telling me to do something, and he was like, give this guy a chance to close himself out. So very powerful, man. And I really appreciate you coming here and doing what you've done. So, David McClam, host of True Crime Authors and Extraordinary People, and honestly, an extraordinary person yourself. Brother, thank you for being on. It's been inspirational, and I love what you're doing.
Thank you, Roy. I appreciate the invite, man. And I was more than honored to be on your show today. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, that's been another episode of the Podcaster Nation. This is the place where it's about podcasters, it's for podcasters, and it's done by podcasters. And every once in a while, we get to do a little something good too and put some really strong, powerful messages out there. I appreciate you all listening today. As we prove today, and I hope that we continue to prove every day, this is the place where the rising tide truly raises all ships. So keep sailing.